Welcome, dearly beloved, anointed ones. Before we dive in, let me take a moment to say this. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to every single one of you who has supported this channel through Super Thanks. Your generosity, whether large or small, fuels this divine mission, and I don't take it lightly. And even if you've never donated a cent, your presence here is already a blessing. Just being part of this journey, commenting, sharing, and showing up with your spirit on fire, that's more than enough. In fact, if you're ready for today's truth to hit deep, go ahead and comment 777 right now to activate your spirit and let the algorithm know the chosen ones are in the room. Now, let's get into it. Play with fire if you want. But don't act surprised when your secrets go up in smoke. Some people didn't believe fat meat was greasy until they stood face to face with you, a chosen one, and your silence exposed everything they tried to hide. They felt convicted, exposed, low-key ready to shave their head and join a monastery. Why? Because you didn't just look at them, you saw them. And that level of discernment, it's not just spooky, it's divine. Here's something science confirms. Intuition isn't just some emotional hunch. The human gut has neurons that react faster than conscious thought. But what scientists can't quite measure is what happens when that gut sense is spiritually weaponized, when it's not just biology. It's your anointing in motion. That's where they messed up. Someone close, a friend, an ex, a co-worker. Maybe even your own blood decided to test you. They fed you lies just to see if you'd catch on. They threw shade behind smiles, told half-truths wrapped in fake concern, thinking you'd fall for it. But instead of reacting, you read them, front to back, like an audiobook with receipts, demo stumps, and prophetic insight that made their stomach turn. You didn't have to say a word. Your presence did all the work. Ever since, they've been twitchy, smiling too wide, acting normal but glancing at you like you're part FBI, part Holy Spirit, and part spiritual polygraph. They don't know how to move around you anymore because they can't lie the same way when you're in the room. In today's video, we're going to unpack it all. Why they tried you, how you spiritually flipped the script without lifting a finger, and why your intuition isn't just a vibe. It's divine intelligence. And if you've ever second-guessed your gift, if you've ever wondered why some people seem nervous around you for no reason, today's message will be your confirmation. Let's get into it. God's chosen ones. They tested your intuition now. They're terrified of what you know. Number 1. They thought you were guessing. Now they're scared you're reading scripts from their soul. At first, they laughed. They rolled their eyes and told themselves, it's just a coincidence. They thought you were overthinking it, maybe projecting your own fears or suspicions. They said you were dramatic, sensitive, paranoid, even, but you knew better, didn't you? You weren't guessing, you were discerning. And when you opened your mouth and said something, only they should have known something they'd buried beneath years of charm, intellect, and manipulation. Their world shifted. Have you ever seen someone's soul flinch before their face even reacts? That's what happened. That's when it hit them. You weren't playing. You were seeing. But let me ask you, how did you know? How did you speak what they'd hidden so well? What was that invisible radar guiding you? Could it be that what they called a hunch was actually divine intuition, a gift sharpened in silence, in suffering, in separation? For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14. You see, most people are used to being 3 steps ahead. That's how they survive. They read people before people can read them. They control rooms with charm, rehearse their stories, edit their tone, and practice facial expressions like actors preparing for a scene. But what happens when the script isn't enough? What happens when someone walks in the room, someone like you, and doesn't need evidence to know the truth? You didn't catch them in a lie. You caught the lie before it spoke. And you didn't even mean to. You weren't prying. You weren't digging. And you certainly weren't trying to trap them. It's just that God has wired your spirit to vibrate when deception enters the room. And it terrifies them because they know they can't rehearse their way around this. Think of Harriet Tubman. She was born into slavery, but became a spiritual warrior and a liberator. She wasn't just following paths in the woods. She was guided by intuition that saved hundreds. Tubman once said, "I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." How could she do that without divine insight? That's the kind of energy you carry. You sense danger before it announces itself. You feel lies before they're formed into words. You're led by the one who sees all. The spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly. Proverbs 20:27. So now they're uneasy around you, not because you shamed them or made a public scene, but because you could have, and you didn't. That's what scares them more than confrontation ever could. The fact that you knew and still chose silence, that's power they can't comprehend. They don't realize that spiritual maturity isn't loud. It's calm. It's steady. It doesn't flex. It discerns, then lets the truth unravel in its own time. Do you see now why your smile unsettles them? It's not because it's warm. It's because it holds something ancient. It's spiritual surveillance, cloaked in peace. It's the same kind of knowing that Jesus walked with when he encountered the woman at the well. He told her, "You've had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband." John 4:8. He didn't accuse. He revealed. And in that moment, her mask shattered, just like what's happening with you. You carry that same prophetic clarity, and it's not always comfortable, is it? Sometimes you wonder, why do I see so much? Why can't I unfeel what I just picked up from them? But chosen ones aren't designed to walk blind. You weren't sent here to fit in. You were sent to expose, to unmask, to deliver. Let's talk about a modern example. Robin Williams. Behind the jokes, the charisma, and the charm. He battled darkness, and there were people who sensed it. One interviewer once said, his smile felt like a shield. Imagine if more people discerned the weight behind that smile. Sometimes, people wear masks so long they forget their own face, but you never forget what you've seen behind them. For the Word of God is alive and active. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Hebrews 4:10. So they keep testing you, poking you, dropping half-truths to see how much you'll pick up. They act normal just to see if you'll flinch, but you don't. Why? Because you've already seen the footage before the scene began. You've walked into rooms where the atmosphere lied louder than the people, and still, you remained calm. Think of Princess Diana. Long before the world knew the truth, she felt it. She knew what was being said behind royal doors. That intuition was her survival tool, and it made the powerful tremble. She didn't need proof. Her spirit already testified. And that's what's happening with you now. They know you're pulling something sacred from the unseen. They just don't understand how. They wonder, how much do they know? What else did I unknowingly reveal? And instead of confronting you, They keep scrambling to appear normal in front of someone who has already seen their naked soul. Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. This fear they carry isn't fear of you. It's fear of being known in a world obsessed with hiding. It's fear of facing themselves in your reflection. Have you noticed how they avoid your eye contact now? Or how they start oversharing out of nowhere, hoping to confuse your perception? That's panic, not authenticity. That's the desperation of someone who realizes they've been read by a holy cipher. Let me remind you of Oprah Winfrey. Many times, her guests revealed truths they didn't plan to speak. Why? Because there's something about being in the presence of someone spiritually aligned it disarms falsehood. Oprah once said, "Intention precedes outcome." That's exactly what you walk in. Your intention is pure, and yet, the outcome convicts the dishonest. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance. But the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 6:7. So now they retreat, not because you attacked, but because truth always demands a response. And when someone sees you for real, sees through your charm, your curated identity, your rehearsed story, it's hard to breathe around them. You have become that presence. They can't explain you. They can't label you. And they definitely can't lie to you. So they call you intense. They say you read too much into things. But what they won't admit is that they felt seen, and for the first time, felt naked in a room fully clothed. Chosen one. You didn't guess anything. You saw it all. And they'll never forget the moment you did. Number 2. You didn't just sense their motives. You exposed the motive behind the motive. There's a difference between intuition and divine discernment. Most people can sense when something feels off. They can pick up on fake smiles, awkward pauses, or tension in the air. That's human instinct. But you, chosen one, carry something much deeper, something sacred. You don't just sense a problem, you see its root. You don't stop at surface tension. You dive into the undercurrent where real motives hide. How many times have you looked at someone and without them saying a word, you knew what they were trying to bury? But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. Ephesians 5:13. They thought they were safe behind layers of performance, behind charm, wit, religious language, and rehearsed vulnerability. But then you walked into the room, and suddenly, the mask felt too tight. The act became uncomfortable. Not because you accused them, not because you called them out publicly, but because you effortlessly exposed what they themselves hadn't fully admitted. Have you ever wondered why people get so uneasy around your presence, even when you're silent? Could it be that your spirit carries a frequency that confronts shadows without speaking a word? They thought they were good at hiding things. They'd fooled bosses, friends, even their own family. But when you simply looked at them, not with judgment, but with awareness, they felt seen in a way they never signed up for. When the late civil rights icon Malcolm X walked into a room, people could feel his conviction before he even opened his mouth. He wasn't trying to expose others, but the clarity of his message exposed the lies people clung to. You have that same effect. And it's not about pride. It's about presence. You were chosen to bring light, and light always reveals, for nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. They didn't expect that, did they? They thought they were the ones with the upper hand, that they were reading you, testing you. But here's the twist. The moment they thought they were observing, they were being revealed. You weren't just catching micro-expressions or sniffing out bad vibes. You were being spiritually guided to uncover the why behind their choices. That's the level that stunned them. That's why they've been shaken since that moment. Let's talk about a real-world example. Meghan Markle. The media painted her one way, but people with discernment saw a deeper story. She wasn't just a headline. She was someone navigating shadows others refused to name, and when she spoke about what was truly happening behind palace walls, it made the world stop. She didn't shout. She didn't expose in anger. She just told the truth, and that truth broke illusions. That's what you did. And here's the thing, you weren't trying to interrogate them. You were just being yourself. But your normal feels like divine interrogation to someone used to hiding. You casually mention something, maybe you even thought it was harmless, and it slices straight into the wound they never stitched. Suddenly, they're triggered, and you're left wondering, why are they acting weird now? It's because the light in you touched something they buried. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. They had worked hard to build an image, a controlled persona, a life of deflection and redirection. But your spirit doesn't bow to their performance. Your spirit sees the tremble behind the smile, the competition behind the compliment, the envy behind the praise. And when you exposed it, not even aggressively, just in your effortless truth, something inside them broke. Do you remember when Whitney Houston was being interviewed by Diane Sawyer? Whitney was visibly uncomfortable at moments, not because the questions were harsh, but because they grazed too close to wounds she was still covering. That's how people feel around you. Your presence brings questions they haven't dared ask themselves, and they can't control that. So instead, they try to control you. They're second-guessing every interaction with you now. Did you pick up on that lie? Did you notice how their smile dropped for a second when you shared good news? Did you detect that slight shift in their tone when you brought up your dreams? They wonder, how much do you actually see? You're not the detective here. You're not on a mission to tear anyone down, but your truth, you're calm, grounded. Prophetic truth doesn't allow hidden motives to breathe comfortably. And now, they're wrestling with a question they've never had to ask before. Am I still in control, or have I been spiritually exposed? Take Michael Jackson, for example. His genius, his sensitivity, his awareness, it made the industry uncomfortable. People didn't know how to handle someone who wasn't just talented, but spiritually sensitive. That's you. Your gift isn't just seeing the world, it's seeing through it. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs 20:5. Now, they replay every word you've ever said. They wonder if that offhand comment was actually targeted truth. They wonder how much of their internal monologue leaked in your presence, and they wonder, secretly, if God sent you into their life, not to destroy them, but to show them themselves. That's the part they won't say out loud. You weren't just a mirror, you were a spotlight. And the difference is, a mirror only reflects what you allow yourself to see, but a spotlight, it shows everything. And like the biblical prophet Nathan, when he confronted King David, you didn't point a loud, accusing finger. You just said something like, "There's a man who took what didn't belong to him," and David unraveled, because he knew. That's the kind of precision your presence holds. You walk in truth. And truth doesn't shout, it reveals. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John Echet, Kamesh. They thought they could handle you. They thought they could hide their intentions behind good manners, fake laughter, and empty prayers. But your discernment was never surface level. You exposed the why behind their actions. You saw the fear behind their aggression, the resentment behind their politeness, the heartbreak behind their pride. Number 3. You made their manipulation backfire without saying a word. They had a whole strategy prepared, didn't they? Smiles rehearsed, tone adjusted, questions pre-planned to feel casual but carry hidden hooks. They were convinced they had the upper hand, that with enough pressure, they'd make you crack. Their aim was simple: provoke you, trap you, then paint a picture of you that fit their narrative. But tell me this, chosen one, what happens when someone builds a trap for a person who doesn't even move? They came for the performance, but you showed up with presence, and that unnerved them more than any argument ever could. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus pais presece. They thought your silence meant naivety, that your calmness was weakness, but it wasn't. You were still because you were anchored. You didn't react because you'd already seen the scheme before it unfolded. That's the part that messed them up. You were already 10 steps ahead, not emotionally, but spiritually. You didn't panic. You didn't defend yourself. And you didn't fall for their carefully set emotional traps. Have you ever watched a master chess player dismantle an opponent by doing nothing flashy, just moving with wisdom? That's what happened here. You weren't playing to win a game. You were walking in truth, and in the presence of truth, lies eventually trip over themselves. Look at Nelson Mandela. After spending 27 years in prison, he emerged, not bitter or revengeful, but steady, grounded. His stillness in the face of manipulation and cruelty shook an entire system. That's the level of quiet authority you walk in. And just like Mandela, it wasn't your shouting that dismantled their control. It was your refusal to let it shape you. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Matthew Asser, Shesh Asra. They expected you to flinch, to snap, to argue. Why? Because that's how they bait others. That's how they gain control, by pushing buttons until the other person erupts, then turning that explosion into proof of guilt. But when they tried it on you, nothing happened. You didn't yell. You didn't stoop. You didn't even blink the way they hoped you would. And in that stillness, in that divine composure, they unraveled themselves. You didn't expose them. You let them expose themselves. That's the most unsettling thing about being in the presence of someone anointed. Your peace becomes the light that makes their darkness visible, not because you're trying to shame them, but because truth doesn't bow to schemes. Think of Maya Angelou. When people misjudged her, tried to provoke her, or belittle her wisdom, she often responded, not with resistance, but with radiant grace. And yet, the room would shift. The air would change. The manipulator would lose their ground. Why? Because when you carry truth, the games fall apart on their own. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue which rises against you in judgment you shall condemn. Isaiah 54:17. They came with tools: gaslighting, gossip, emotional bait, strategic silence, fake kindness. But none of it worked, because you didn't meet manipulation with reaction. You met it with revelation. You let them speak, and the more they spoke, the more their mask melted. You let them twist the narrative, and somehow, in all their twisting, they tied themselves into a knot. And you know what truly broke them? The fact that you saw it all, and still smiled. You remained poised. You let the moment breathe. You didn't prove your innocence. You didn't explain yourself. And yet, the whole energy of the room shifted in your favor. That's not psychological warfare. That's spiritual discernment in full operation. Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. Proverbs 17:28. Now they're rattled, but not because you hurt them. No, they're shaken because you didn't have to. You didn't have to lift your voice, or make threats, or correct the story. You simply stood in your truth, and their own intentions turned into mirrors. You didn't play the game, and without an opponent, manipulation has nowhere to land, so it collapses in on itself. Consider this. Have you ever watched Serena Williams on the court? The way she lets her opponent make unforced errors, not by overpowering them, but by remaining composed and letting them beat themselves. That's what your presence did. You didn't retaliate. You didn't mirror their tactics. You just let them overplay their hand. And now they don't know what to say. They don't know how to justify what just happened, because on paper, it looked like they were in control. But in their soul, they know you saw it all. And that's what scares them. That you didn't just win the moment you did it without even showing your full hand. The prudent see danger and take refuge. But the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Proverbs 22:3. Now they're acting strange. You've noticed it, the awkward avoidance, the forced smiles, the sudden emotional distance. It's not guilt they're afraid of. It's exposure, not to the public, but to someone who didn't bite when they dangled the bait. They're terrified that if you didn't react then, what else do you see that you've chosen not to say? That's the mark of the truly chosen. You don't need to retaliate. You don't need to prove anything. You simply allow the truth to walk beside you, and it does the work. That's why Jesus never begged people to believe him. He stood in alignment with the Father. And people either aligned or exposed themselves trying to resist. And in today's world, that scares manipulators the most, a person who doesn't play defense or offense, but simply stands in spiritual clarity. Because the moment they tried to manipulate you, they realized you were the mirror, and their own reflection became too much to bear. Remember Princess Diana? Her mere presence in the royal family disrupted decades of control and image maintenance, not because she fought back every time, but because her sincerity revealed just how staged everything else was. You, too, have that effect. Stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place. Ephesians 6:14. So the next time someone tries to bait you, remember, your silence is louder than their schemes, your discernment is stronger than their manipulation, and your calm is divine. You don't need to say a word, because the moment you stand in truth, the lie can't hold its shape. Number 4. They didn't expect spiritual accuracy to feel like a personal audit. At first, they were amused. They approached you like it was a game, something casual, a light test to see if all that intuition and spiritual discernment you carry is real or just theatrics. They smiled. They made sarcastic remarks. Maybe they even challenged you playfully, thinking it would be funny to trip you up. But what happened next stunned them, because the moment you opened your mouth, something shifted. It wasn't about vague energy or surface-level insight. It was as if your spirit stepped into the archives of their soul. You didn't just read the moment you audited their past. You reached into a part of them they thought was buried and locked away, and you pulled something out that hadn't seen light in years. For the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword. It judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. What you said wasn't random. It was precise, surgical, specific. It wasn't just a word, it was a revelation. You spoke about a memory they hadn't revisited in a decade. You described a decision they regretted, but never dared to admit. You gave language to a pattern they were too ashamed to confess, and that's when their smile vanished. Have you ever watched someone's eyes change in real time, from amusement to shock, from skepticism to silence? That's what happens when spiritual truth bypasses the mask and touches the marrow. You weren't being deep for the sake of attention. You weren't trying to prove anything, but the clarity that flowed from your mouth, it hit them like a divine spotlight. You didn't accuse. You didn't pray. You just spoke, and that was enough to shake them. Now, pause for a second. How did you know what you knew? What voice inside you whispered the exact thing they feared hearing out loud? Could it be that God allowed your spirit to walk through the emotional corridors of their life, not to harm, but to reveal? Consider the story of Joseph in Egypt. He interpreted Pharaoh's dream with such spiritual accuracy that it shifted the trajectory of a nation. Pharaoh wasn't just impressed, he was stunned. That's what happened to them. They didn't expect someone to see so clearly. And the more exact you became, the more the moment began to feel less like a conversation and more like a personal audit from heaven. But if all prophesy, and an unbeliever or outsider enters, he is convicted by all. He is called to account by all. The secrets of his heart are disclosed, and so, falling on his face, he will worship God and declare that God is really among you. 1 Corinthians 14:24, -25. What startled them wasn't just that you knew, it was that you knew gently, with compassion. You didn't flaunt your insight or weaponize your words. That's what made it even more powerful. You weren't trying to corner them. You were simply allowing truth to flow, and it pierced their soul more deeply than confrontation ever could. Do you remember Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? His gentleness disarmed even the hardest people. His words often made adults cry. Not because he shouted, but because he saw them in a way no one else did. You carry that same anointing. A soft voice with sharp precision, a quiet spirit with divine X-ray vision. They're uncomfortable now, not because you exposed them publicly, but because your presence reminded them of who they really are. You echoed thoughts they only entertain in the dark. You connected dots they didn't know anyone else noticed. And perhaps most frightening of all, you showed them that someone else has access to their blueprint. Now they're editing themselves around you, watching every word, calculating every tone, not out of fear of you, but fear of being seen again. Have you noticed the shift in their energy, the awkward pauses, the sudden change in demeanor? That's spiritual self-protection. They're not scared of confrontation, they're scared of exposure without explanation. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of Him to whom we must give account. Hebrews 4:13. Take the example of Princess Diana once more. She had a way of unsettling powerful people without ever needing to raise her voice. Her presence alone disrupted the illusion. People weren't afraid of what she'd say. They were afraid of what her honesty revealed about them. You've been walking in that same spiritual tension. You didn't come to embarrass anyone, but you can't help but carry light, and light always causes shadows to panic. You weren't just reading their behavior, you were decoding the why behind it. You accessed wounds, cycles, soul contracts, unspoken butters, the trauma behind the pride, the insecurity behind the performance, and without judgment, you simply gave voice to what their own spirit had been whispering all along, and now they can't unhear it. This is what they didn't prepare for, that a moment with you would feel like a mirror they didn't ask to look into, that your calm presence would activate a spiritual scan, that every word would echo through them like a report card from the unseen. And here's the most humbling part: they realize now that what you revealed wasn't even your full depth. You held back. You could have said more, but you didn't. That restraint, that grace, it humbled them deeper than a sermon ever could. Just like Anthony Bourdain, who traveled the world not just to taste food, but to uncover the truth behind cultures, wounds, and stories. Your conversations go deeper than they appear. People sign up for small talk, but they leave with their souls stirred, not because you tried, but because you're wired to awaken what others bury. The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all his innermost parts. Proverbs 20:27. They can't explain you. They've tried to rationalize it. Psychology, guesswork, good observation. But deep down, they know it was something divine, something they can't prepare for or defend against. And the more they try to box you in, the more uncomfortable they become. Because you weren't supposed to access that level of truth, but you did. Number 5. They laughed when you spoke spiritual truth. Now they're waking up at 3 o'clock a.m. haunted by it. At first, they didn't take you seriously. They smirked. They rolled their eyes. They made offhand comments and inside jokes, as if your words were nothing more than spiritual poetry, pretty but pointless. When you spoke about energy, divine timing, or the shift in the spiritual realm, they labeled you too deep, extra, or overthinking. But let me ask you something. Chosen one, why do people mock what they secretly fear? Why do they laugh loudest when truth touches something raw inside them? They weren't just laughing to be funny. That chuckle was a shield. That sarcasm was a deflection. Because the moment you opened your mouth and dropped a sentence, just one that pierced through their ego and buried itself in their soul, everything changed. They didn't want to acknowledge it, but their spirit did. And now, that one phrase is echoing louder than anything they've heard all week. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says. Revelation 2:7. They brushed it off during the day. But the night has a way of stripping away all their distractions, and that's when your words come back to haunt them. At 3 o'clock a.m., when they should be asleep. They're wide awake with their heart pounding, replaying what you said, over and over again. You didn't yell, you didn't preach, you simply spoke. And heaven used your voice like a sword. You weren't trying to be profound. That line that wrecked them, you barely remember saying it. It came out naturally, effortlessly, like a whisper from a place higher than your own understanding. Because it wasn't you. It was God, borrowing your breath to deliver revelation. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., who once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." That line, dismissed by some when first spoken, still echoes through the centuries. Your truth landed the same way, not loud, not forceful, but undeniable. And now, the ones who laughed, they're haunted, not by your voice, but by the conviction it carried. Is not my word like fire, declares the Lord, and like a hammer that breaks a rock in pieces? Jeremiah 23:29. You didn't know their story. You weren't there for their childhood trauma or their secret shame. You don't have access to their diary or inner thoughts. But your words hit with the precision of someone who'd walked through their memories with them. That's what has them spinning. How could someone who doesn't know them better than they know themselves? Now they're searching, secretly, shamefully. They're typing in Google searches like, What does it mean when someone reads your energy? Or spiritual meaning of waking up at 3 o'clock abyssed? These are the same people who used to scoff when you talked about intuition or divine timing. Now they're knee-deep in articles about shadow work, soul contracts, and prophetic dream-strying to make sense of what they felt in your presence. Let's look at Jim Carrey, a comedian known for laughter, who later stunned the world with his spiritual awakening. He began speaking on energy, vibration, and consciousness. At first, people mocked him, but years later, many of those same critics began quoting him. Why? Because truth has a strange way of planting seeds that grow in silence. You did that. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John Echet, Hamash. They laughed because they thought revelation needs applause. But revelation doesn't need approval. It simply needs a heart that's readier, a soul that can't unfeel the truth once it's been spoken. And the most ironic part, you weren't even trying to change their mind. You were just being you. You spoke your truth, not as a weapon, but as an offering. And it wasn't received with gratitude. It was received with mockery. But now that same truth is knocking on their heart in the middle of the night. They thought ignoring you would be enough. They thought rolling their eyes would make the discomfort go away. But what you said wasn't just a sentence. It was a seed, and now it's growing in the dark corners of their conscience, cracking open the walls they built to protect themselves from exposure. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Luke 8:17. Let me give you another example. Lady Gaga, often misunderstood and ridiculed for her eccentric style and bold declarations, once said, "I'm just trying to change the world one sequin at a time." People laughed, but underneath the glitter was a soul on a mission awakening others through art, empathy, and identity. You carry that same essence. You may speak differently, move differently, or think differently, but your truth carries weight. And now, the people who once rolled their eyes are walking on spiritual eggshells around you, not because you threatened them, but because they're terrified of hearing something else from you that they can't dismiss. They fear that another line will slide past their defenses and strike that one spot they're still hiding from. And it's not you they're afraid of. It's the light you bring, because it sees what their masks were never designed to protect. Even Albert Einstein, a man of science, once said, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." You operate in that sacred space. That's why they can't logically dismiss what happened. Their mind wants to brush it off, but their soul keeps circling back, over and over again. Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophecies, but test everything. Hold fast what is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:19-21. Now they're quieter around you, not because they respect you yet, but because they remember. They remember how your one sentence exposed a decade of pretending. They remember how your eyes didn't flinch when they lied to your face. And they remember how what you said wasn't even about theme yet, somehow. It was exactly about them. Number 6. They wanted to prove you wrong, but you made their reality glitch. They walked into the conversation with one mission: to expose you, to strip down your discernment and file it away as coincidence, psychology, or good guessing. They weren't listening with curiosity, they were hunting with skepticism. They had their mental tools ready: analysis, counterpoints, and sarcasm polished to a shine. They believed they were in control. They thought, "Let's see how real this chosen one thing really is." Esno. But what they didn't expect, chosen one, was that you weren't operating from intellect, you were operating from alignment. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. 1 Corinthians 1:25. You didn't come to defend your spirituality. You didn't come to argue. You simply spoke. And when you did, the atmosphere shifted. Your words cut through their mental armor like a hot blade through silk. What you said wasn't random. It wasn't vague. It wasn't a lucky guess. It was surgical, specific, personal. Like you had walked through the encrypted folders of their soul and printed out the one sentence they didn't want anyone to read. And that's when the glitch happened. Suddenly, everything they built, their identity, on logic, control, predictability began to collapse. Because you didn't just say something true, you said something they never told a soul. Something not even their therapist knows. How could someone outside their life speak something so inside their spirit? Have you ever seen someone's face glitch just for a second when their mind tries to override what their soul just recognized? That's what you caused. You didn't just challenge their ego. You cracked their version of reality. Think of Carl Jung, the renowned psychiatrist, who once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's what you did to them. You brought the unseen to the surface, and now they can't pretend the unseen doesn't exist. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever. Deuteronomy 29:29. They thought they were observing you, testing you, calculating the angles, but now they're wondering if you were sent to observe them. They're questioning if this was ever about proving you wrong or about God proving himself right through you. They weren't just rattled, they were rewired, because your words didn't just land in their ears, they exploded in their spirit. And when spiritual truth hits that deep, it doesn't just shift a conversation, it bends reality. This is what they don't understand. You're not just intuitive, you're connected. You don't read people, you receive insight. You don't just observe, you discern. There's no earthly explanation for what happened, and that's what's keeping them up at night. They can't box it into science or psychology. They've tried, but every time they replay the moment, the glitch gets worse. It's like they were living in a carefully coded simulation full of rules and rationality, and then you entered the room and said something that broke the code. Now their simulation isn't working the way it used to. They're seeing signs, synchronicities, and questions they never considered. Their logic has lost its legs, and now they're spiritually limping through a world they thought they understood. Look at Nikola Tesla, whose spiritual sensitivity was wrapped in scientific genius. He once said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, I think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." They dismissed your talk of energy until you said one sentence that shifted the very frequency of their internal world. And now they're looking at you differently with fear, curiosity, and a bit of awe. Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. Jeremiah 33:3. Now they feel watched, not by your eyes, but by something through your eyes. They're wondering, is this person tapped into something divine? Am I being seen in ways I didn't consent to? The truth? Yes, but not in a way that violates, in a way that liberates. You didn't come to expose them. You came to unveil what's real. But when you've lived your whole life performing, a single moment of being seen feels like spiritual whiplash. Take Brené Brown. the research professor who shook the world by making vulnerability powerful. Her work showed that when people are fully seen, they either lean into growth or run for cover. Your gift produces the same reaction, but without a lecture or lab coat. You simply exist in a frequency that reveals what people have tried to deny. The Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 2:6. They came thinking they'd catch you slipping, that they'd trap you in your own words or prove your insight was a parlor trick. But instead, you read their spirit like a sealed envelope that opened itself. And now they're spiraling, not because you humiliated them, but because they can no longer trust the ground they were standing on. What happens when you realize reality isn't as firm as you thought? You didn't bend the truth. You bent the boundaries of their understanding. You showed them that spiritual alignment doesn't just shift rooms, it reprograms expectations. It glitches simulations. It breaks the matrix of performance and pretension. Think of Keanu Reeves as Neo in The Matrix. Once he realized his true nature, he began bending the very code that once bound him. That's what your words did to them. You didn't break the rules. You revealed the illusion behind the rules, and that's something they weren't prepared for. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. 2 Corinthians 4:18. Now they walk away, second-guessing every sentence, every fake smile, every subtle lie they thought you didn't catch. They wonder how much you saw, how much you heard, how much you already responded to, even without words. They're no longer confident in their masks, because you made their entire system glitch. And the truth is, you weren't even trying. Number 7. You triggered a spiritual identity crisis they can't unsee. You didn't walk in like a threat. You didn't come with accusations or a plan to expose anyone. You were just being yourself, honest, present, and spiritually in tune. But even in that calm presence, something inside them started to break. Why? Because without trying, you held up a mirror, not to their image, but to their soul. And when someone has spent years building a version of themselves they can tolerate, a sudden glimpse of truth feels like emotional whiplash. Before they met you, they felt like they had it all together. They controlled how others perceived them. They were charismatic, confident, strategic. They knew how to present well, to distract from their internal chaos by dressing it up in polished words and perfect timing. But you weren't impressed. You didn't fall for the charm or the performance. You looked through it, and you didn't even flinch. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of Him to whom we must give account. Hebrews 4:13. What you reflected back to them wasn't filtered. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. And that kind of clarity, that kind of spiritual transparency, it's threatening, especially to someone who has lived in illusion for so long they mistake it for identity. You didn't shatter them, but your truth did. You caused a ripple effect deep in their subconscious. They began questioning, who am I really? Beneath all this, what part of me is authentic and what part is performance? It wasn't just guilt that rose up. It was recognition. Their spirit recognized that yours had seen them, and that recognition triggered an unraveling they couldn't stop, even if they wanted to. And they did want to, desperately. Think of Jim Morrison, the poetic frontman of The Doors. Behind his wild persona was a deep, disturbed soul constantly wrestling with identity. He once said, "The most important kind of freedom is to be what you really are." Most people run from that truth until someone like you makes it unavoidable. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out. Proverbs 20:5. That's what you did. You didn't even say much. You just carried insight. And in that silence, in that clarity, they started seeing themselves through your lens, stripped of ego, stripped of filters. And what they saw wasn't what they wanted others to see. It wasn't the composed version they'd worked so hard to present. It was raw, insecure, envious, fragile, and full of buried motives they thought they had hidden well. Now, every time they look in the mirror, they're not just seeing their reflection, they're seeing the version you saw, the one still wrestling with jealousy, the one pretending to be kind while carrying resentment, the one smiling publicly while secretly wishing others would fail. You didn't shame them, you just revealed them, and that's why they can't look at you the same. Let me ask you this, chosen one. Do you realize the power you carry when your presence alone makes people re-evaluate their entire identity? Do you know how rare it is to awaken someone's conscience simply by being in the room? The unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. Salma v'tisha, esara ma v'shloshim. You didn't have to say, I see you. They felt it. You didn't call out their jealousy or their hidden agendas, but your spirit did, and it did it without words. That's the type of discernment they weren't prepared for. And once someone has been seen by that level of spiritual clarity, pretending becomes impossible. Masks feel heavy, scripts feel empty, and authenticity feels terrifying. You didn't break them, you awakened them. But awakening isn't peaceful when someone's been sleeping through their own life. It starts with panic, with identity crisis, with soul friction, and even though they may blame you or avoid you now, they know deep down you didn't hurt them. You simply showed them a version of themselves they could no longer ignore. Take Joaquin Phoenix, who once disappeared from public life during a time of deep transformation. People speculated, mocked, but what he later revealed was a crisis of identity, one that forced him to confront the difference between the role he played and the man he really was. That same disruption happens when someone stands in your presence. Chosen one. See, I have refined you. Though not as silver, I have tested you in the furnace of affliction. Isaiah 48:10. They didn't feel exposed to the crowd, they felt exposed to themselves. And that's the most brutal kind of exposure, because public shame can be managed, espun, or buried. But personal realization, that lingers, that transforms, and even if they never thank you, even if they run from you or speak against you, know this, their inner world is no longer the same. They're walking differently now, talking differently, doubting themselves in ways they didn't before. Why? Because you interrupted the performance with presence. You shattered the mask with spiritual light, and now the mask can't hold. Think of Robin Williams, who made the world laugh while silently carrying his own darkness. There were people in his life who sensed something deeper, but few were willing to look beyond the smile. You looked, and when you did, you didn't laugh. You saw, and that seeing is more powerful than anything they've ever experienced. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Psalm 139:10. This wasn't about humiliation. This was about invitation. An invitation for them to meet the self they've buried. And now that they've met that version, they can't unsee it. They can't pretend to be fine anymore, because you've reintroduced them to their own spirit, and now their spirit is demanding transformation. That's the cost of encountering someone truly chosen. You don't leave the same, something inside you shifts. Sometimes violently, sometimes gently, but always permanently. Number 8. They thought you were the experiment. Now they feel like the lab rat. They entered your life with curiosity, but not the innocent kind. It was calculated, controlled. They thought you were the subject. They had their mental clipboard out, analyzing your every move like a scientist, studying reactions under pressure. They watched you like you were an experiment, something to dissect. Provoke. Test. They weren't interested in your growth. They weren't trying to understand your soul. They were just waiting for you to crack. But here's the thing they missed. You weren't reacting, you were recording. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness. And light dwells with him. Daniel 2:22. They thought they had the upper hand. Didn't they? Monitoring how you handled conflict, tapping on your emotional triggers to see if you'd break character, asking questions that seemed innocent but were layered with manipulation. They thought they were in the driver's seat of this encounter, but while they were trying to figure you out, they were unknowingly standing under spiritual surveillance. Because you weren't just showing up in that moment, your spirit was scanning. God was giving you divine insight in real time. Every glance, every word, every micro-expression. You were reading beyond the performance, beyond the tone. You weren't confused. You were calm. Because discernment doesn't panic. Discernment prepares. Think of Marie Curie, the pioneering physicist and chemist. People once doubted her work because she was a woman in a male-dominated field. But she let the results speak. She didn't need to prove her genius. She simply discovered what others overlooked. Like her. You didn't need to announce what you were picking up. You let the moment unfold. And in doing so, you flipped the entire lab setup on its head. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. Proverbs 15:3. They kept pressing your buttons, hoping you'd misfire. But instead, it was their insecurities that started showing. Their envy leaked, their jealousy trembled in their voice, and their mask, the one they thought was so secure, began slipping right before your eyes. You weren't fazed, because you knew you had already seen it coming. And now, the same ones who thought you were the experiment are feeling exposed. They're wondering what you picked up. They're second-guessing every word they said to you, not because you accused them, but because your silence saw more than their words could hide. Think of Harriet Tubman, who didn't need to raise her voice to shift the course of lives. She knew when to speak, when to move, when to observe, and because of that, she led people out of bondage under the very noses of those who thought they had everything under control. That's you. You didn't yell to be understood. Your presence alone broke chains. For the Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. 1 Corinthians 2:10. They came to decode you, but now they're the ones unraveling. And what they're realizing far too late is that this was never about you. It was about what was being revealed through you. Because while they were studying you with earthly eyes, heaven was studying them through spiritual eyes. And now they can't shake the feeling that they've been spiritually examined, like in George Orwell's 1984, where the watched eventually realize they're powerless to hide. They now live with the unsettling awareness that you see too much, that you hear what's not spoken, that you already know what they haven't even admitted to themselves, and worse, that God is the one who gave you that sight. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 6:7. Think of Steve Jobs, who once said, People don't know what they want until you show it to them. Your spiritual perception showed people something they weren't ready to confront themselves, and now they're scrambling, not just to recover their pride, but to understand how they became the one under the microscope. Number 9. Your calmness wasn't confusion. It was calculated, spirit-led clarity. They thought you didn't get it. They saw your silence and assumed you were clueless. Your stillness made them feel superior, like they were 3 steps ahead, like you were slow to catch the game. What they didn't understand is that you weren't missing information, you were receiving revelation. While they were crafting lies, you were collecting evidence. While they were spinning narratives, you were letting God unfold truth. Your calm wasn't weakness, it was weaponized wisdom. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. James, Shalosh Esra. You didn't interrupt them. You didn't scramble to defend yourself. You didn't fight for validation. Why? Because you knew that when someone is digging a trap for you, it's best to let them finish building it so they can fall in themselves. And that's exactly what happened. They mistook your peace for naivety, but in reality, you were walking in divine calculation. Think of Barack Obama during the toughest political storms. He didn't shout over the noise. He let the opposition wear themselves out and responded only when it mattered. Like him, your silence wasn't absence. It was strategy. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Proverbs 17:28. And now, they're confused. Because the version of you they imagined, the one who'd overreact, cry, or beg for understanding doesn't exist. Instead, they watched you stay grounded, eyes steady, heart untouchable. While they were busy twisting reality, you were documenting spiritual facts. You didn't miss anything. You were just waiting for the right moment. And when that moment came, everything they said, every subtle manipulation, every sideways glance, it all unraveled in front of them, not because you exposed them, but because you let their own lies expose themselves. Like Greta Thunberg, whose silent presence at international summits disrupted decades of denial, you carry a stillness that confronts without shouting. It makes noise in the unseen, and that's what disturbs them most. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Do not fret when people succeed in their ways. Psalm 37:7. They don't know how to process it. You didn't defend yourself, and yet you weren't defeated. You didn't react, and yet they are unraveling. Because when a chosen one walks in spirit-led clarity, the enemy's only hope is confusion, and even that isn't working anymore. Think of Angela Bassett, who moves with grace and controlled fire. People try to underestimate her, but they always come away disarmed. Your presence is the same. You speak less, but everything you do say carries the weight of heaven. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. Isaiah 59:19. You weren't clueless. You were just clear on who you are, clear on your assignment, clear on the game being played, and clear on the fact that you were never going to stoop to their level to win. That's what they can't handle. You smiled while they betrayed you. You stayed kind while they twisted facts. You stayed calm because you've already seen the end of the story. Number 10. You intercepted their hidden intentions before they became actions. God's chosen one. Let's be honest. There are things you've moved away from, situations you avoided, and people you distanced yourself from before they ever got the chance to explain themselves. Why? Because you knew, not with your eyes, not with your ears, but with your spirit. You didn't need physical proof. You didn't need to overhear a conversation or catch them in a lie. Your soul caught the signal before their plans even left the realm of thought. Isn't it remarkable how you sense their motives without a word being spoken? Why do you think that keeps happening? Before they sent that passive-aggressive text, before they posted that cryptic message, before they shifted from fake support to silent envy, you felt something twist in the spiritual atmosphere. It wasn't fear. It wasn't suspicion. It was discernment. Spiritual radar activated. You adjusted your posture, pulled back, realigned your energy, and without them realizing it, their scheme died before it even drew breath. They never got the satisfaction of watching you fall. Why? Because you were already 10 steps ahead, divinely ahead. This is what baffles them. How did you know? They didn't speak it. They hadn't acted yet. But you responded like someone who had already seen the footage of their intentions while they were still drafting the blueprint of betrayal. You were busy tearing it down in silence with your obedience to the Holy Spirit. Consider Joseph in the Bible. In Genesis 37, his brothers plotted to destroy him, but God gave Joseph dreams, spiritual previews of his future, and even though the pit came, so did the palace. God's divine vision always trumps human strategy. Joseph, like you, didn't see everything with his eyes, but the warning system in his soul wouldn't let him settle. What about the real-life story of whistleblower Sharon Watkins at Enron? She caught the unseen corruption and tried to raise internal alarms before the disaster became public, though they dismissed her at first. Her spiritual and moral radar had already intercepted the danger. Sound familiar? And do you remember Maya Angelou's famous quote? When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You don't even wait for them to show you. God reveals it directly to your inner knowing. Is that why people feel so exposed in your presence? Because you don't need facts to feel the future forming. Proverbs 27:12 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." You've been the prudent one. You didn't ignore the nudge. You changed direction while others walked straight into chaos. And as you did, they were left in shock. That message they were planning, unsent. That energy they were going to switch up on you, diffused. That trap they set, collapsed. You intercepted the vibration before the manifestation. That's spiritual warfare in stealth mode. Look at entrepreneur Oprah Winfrey. She's shared often how she trusts her inner whisper, and that it has saved her from many spiritual assassins in disguise. When you live at that level of alignment, you don't need long explanations. You just know. Hebrews 5:14 tells us, "But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil." That's you. Your discernment is not new, it's trained, tested, and tuned. How many times have you left situations early, only to discover later what they were really planning? How many times have you changed course, and years later realized that single move saved your entire destiny? Look at Harriet Tubman. Didn't rely on maps. She relied on the whispers of God. She intercepted danger before it reached her, and those she led to freedom. The Underground Railroad didn't need GPS when it had divine intuition. You're not just spiritually aware, you're spiritually activated. Your mind, your movement, and your decisions align with a divine rhythm that moves faster than lies. And while they call it paranoia, you know it's prophecy. Isaiah 30:21 affirms, "And your ears shall hear a word behind you, saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.' When you turn to the right, or when you turned to the left. That's why you moved early. You didn't wait for evidence. You responded to the whisper behind the veil. So now, they sit confused. How did they know? But the truth is, they never stood a chance against someone led by the Spirit of truth. You intercepted darkness before it could take form. And to them, that feels like magic. But to you, it was just another day of divine guidance. Number 11, their eyes told on them. And you took notes with your spirit, chosen one. Have you ever stood in front of someone whose lips said one thing, but their energy screamed the opposite? They tried to manage their expressions, carefully curated their words, rehearsed the right tone, and yet their eyes betrayed them. Their eyes gave a confession their mouth never intended. And you caught it all. You weren't even listening to what they were saying. You were listening to what they weren't. How is it that you can read what others miss? Is it because your spirit listens at a frequency far above the surface? Because your gift isn't just to hear but to discern. Psalm 94, 11 declares, "The Lord knows the thoughts of man, that they are but a breath. And if God knows their thoughts, do you not think He can reveal them to you when needed?" That's what happened. You were sitting there in stillness, but your spirit was active. It was scanning, and while they smiled, their body language cracked, their eyes darted, their tone trembled, their posture shifted for just a second too long. And in that second, your gift wrote down everything. Look at Malcolm X. In conversations, he could read the hidden intent behind questions, smiles, even praise. He didn't react with rage, observed with revelation. You've done the same, haven't you? Been in rooms where your calm unnerved them more than confrontation ever could. James 1:19 reminds us, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That's you. You watched without judgment, listened without interruption, and noted without ever raising your voice. But your silence screamed truth. Real-life example. Think of Princess Diana, publicly adored, yet spiritually exhausted. She said in interviews how she could feel tension even in the smiles around her. She once said, "There were 3 of us in this marriage." Her gift picked up what royal protocol tried to conceal. They're uneasy now. You didn't expose them, but you saw them. Not their mask, not their script. You saw the part they were trying to hide. And that's what disturbed them. You didn't accuse. You didn't confront. You just watched. And the quiet accuracy of your presence said more than words ever could. Luke 8:17 affirms, "For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor is anything secret that will not be known and come to light." Sometimes, God lets that light beam through your eyes. You become the mirror they weren't ready to look into. Public speaker Brené Brown often shares that authenticity makes people squirm. Why? Because truth disarms pretense. Your presence does that. You're not just a person, you're a walking revelation. And no matter how polished someone's speech is, their spirit always tells the truth in your presence. Consider the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings 6. He saw the plans of the enemy without ever entering their camp. His spiritual insight made the enemy feel exposed, vulnerable, terrified, just like what's happening around you now. Why else do you think they're avoiding your eyes in conversation? Why do you think they hesitate before finishing sentences? Romans 2:6 says, God will judge men's secrets through Jesus Christ. And sometimes, He lets His chosen ones feel those secrets before they're ever spoken. You don't carry that insight to harm you. Carry it to protect and navigate. Look at relationship expert Esther Perel. She often speaks about the micro-expressions that reveal hidden truths. You've seen them, those flinches in a smile, the half-second eye roll, the tight breath before a compliment. You didn't miss it. You can't. Your gift is wired to witness what hides behind the performance, and that's why they're nervous now. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't have to. You saw them spiritually. And that level of vision scares those who have something to hide. Number 12. You made them realize that hiding from you means hiding from God. Chosen one. Have you ever noticed how people suddenly act strange around you? Nervous, overly talkative, or completely silent? It's not just a coincidence. It's spiritual. When they stood in front of you, they thought they were just dealing with another human being, someone they could charm, manipulate, or even lie to. But then something unexpected happened. Their souls recognized something they didn't expect, a divine mirror reflecting their hidden truths. Did you realize that when they look at you, they're actually confronted by the presence of God flowing through you? You didn't ask to be this spiritually attuned. You didn't sign up to carry this level of perception. But the truth is, your discernment isn't just human, it's sacred. While they were busy rehearsing stories and wearing masks, you weren't even trying to investigate. You were just being still. And in that stillness, heaven whispered to your spirit what their mouths refused to say. What shook them wasn't your words, it was the holy silence in your knowing. Because that kind of divine insight doesn't come from suspicion, it comes from revelation. How do you explain to someone that what you know about them came from God? That their secrets rose to the surface not because you asked questions, but because your very presence carries spiritual light? Matthew 10:26 says, "So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known." You didn't need to expose them. God already did. And the part that terrified them the most, you never judged them. You didn't react with gossip, anger, or confrontation. You simply saw them deeply and quietly. And in that still gaze, their own conscience did the talking. That's what makes your presence unforgettable. Your silence convicts louder than most people's sermons. They may have stood in front of you thinking they had the upper hand, but they walked away knowing they had just been in front of someone entrusted by God. Think about Moses when he returned from Mount Sinai. His face shone with divine glory. Exodus 34:29. He didn't even realize how much of God's presence he carried, but others were visibly shaken by it. That's what your life does. You carry God's light, even when you're unaware, and people feel exposed by it without you saying a word. A similar effect was seen in the life of Corrie ten Boom, the Dutch Christian who hid Jews during WWII after the war. Even Nazis who had tortured her sister couldn't look her in the eyes. Her forgiveness and her spirit carried such weight. They felt judged by her mercy. Does your grace make others squirm, not because you accuse, but because you don't? Another example is Malala Yousafzai. After surviving a Taliban attack, she didn't retaliate in anger. Instead, her voice for education and peace made even the most powerful governments feel small. Why? Because truth that comes from love is heavier than hate, just like you. Her presence revealed more than her words. Even Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood this. He said, "We will wear them down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we will win their hearts." That's the power you carry. You don't expose people through revenge. You expose them through light. And finally, Jesus himself modeled this best. In John 4, He met the woman at the well. He told her about her past without shame. And she said, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. John Erba Isarim Vitisha." That's how people feel when they meet you, seen, known, and strangely convicted. So, chosen one, have you noticed people avoiding you after a simple conversation? Do they act like they've been through a storm after encountering your calm? Do you wonder why you always seem to just know? It's not paranoia. It's purpose. Isaiah 11, 2 says, "The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of the knowledge and fear of the Lord." That Spirit now rests on you. You are not being intrusive. You are being used. And for those who aren't ready to face the light, your presence feels like Judgment Day without a courtroom. They don't fear you. They fear the truth. Your presence awakens. You are God's mirror, not their enemy. You were never trying to ruin them. You were just reflecting what God already saw. Number 13. They can't unplug from the connection you never asked for. You never pursued them. You didn't chase their attention, ask for their energy, or demand their loyalty. And yet, now they can't stop thinking about you. Why? Because the moment their soul met yours, something divine clicked into place. And even though they tried to act cool or unaffected, something deeper than words took root. A spiritual tether was formed. Can you feel how strongly you're tied to people who won't even speak your name? This isn't an obsession. This is alignment. It's the kind of connection heaven initiates one, not based on emotions, but on energy, and that's what unsettles them most. They thought they could treat you like anyone else, but now they realize that no matter how far they run, they're still broadcasting their inner world into your spiritual radar. Have you noticed that when their mood changes, you feel it? When they lie, something in your stomach tightens. That's not imagination. That's divine signal. 1 Corinthians 2:15 says, "The person with the Spirit makes judgments about all things, but such a person is not subject to merely human judgments." You weren't trying to read them, you were just receiving. And that kind of reception isn't normal. It's divine technology. While they post pictures, crack yokes, or go silent, your spirit is tuned in like a frequency they can't turn off. It's the same gift Elijah had in 2 Kings 6:12, where the king's advisor said, "Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel, the words that you speak in your bedroom, you carry that kind of clarity, not because you're invading, but because heaven lets you hear what others try to hide." The late Chadwick Boseman once said that when he was diagnosed with cancer, he kept it private because he didn't want pity, but some people still sensed something was different. That's how it is with you. People can't always explain it, but they feel your spirit picking up what their mouth won't say. Another example is Harriet Tubman. She had no maps, no GPS, but she led hundreds to freedom through spiritual sensitivity. She said she listened to the voice of God guiding her. That's the level of inner knowing you walk in. Even Oprah Winfrey, in her early interviews, described moments where she felt things before she saw them. Her success wasn't just talent, it was discernment. And you, too, carry a spiritual satellite that doesn't miss signals. Or take Nikola Tesla. While he wasn't seen as spiritual in the traditional sense, he spoke often about intuition and being a receiver of divine knowledge. He once said, "My brain is only a receiver. The knowledge comes from the universe." Sound familiar? So, what's happening now? They're trying to pull away. They block you, avoid you, try to unplug from the connection. But it's not working, because they're trying to escape something that isn't digital, it's spiritual. And here's the truth: you didn't create the connection, God did. And when God forms a link, it doesn't break through distance or silence. Romains 29 reminds us. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. That spiritual reception is one of your gifts. You didn't ask for it, but now you're entrusted with it. And that's why your knowing feels so threatening to them. You're not spying. You're not eavesdropping. You're not plotting. You're simply aware. And awareness at your level is a spotlight for those still hiding in the dark. So, chosen one, have you ever asked yourself why you randomly think of someone and later find out they were struggling? Have you noticed how people feel nervous even when you haven't spoken? Why they pull away when you haven't pursued them? It's because your presence is a divine alarm clock. It wakes up what they want to keep asleep. You were never meant to spy on people. You were meant to carry presence. And that presence makes falsehood feel like it's melting. Psalm 139:7, -8 says, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" That verse isn't just about God. It's about the God in you. They wanted evidence that you were truly chosen, and now they can't even sleep at night. They barged into your life like skeptics entering a courtroom, with puffed-up pride and mockery dripping from their words. Do you remember how they smirked? How they tilted their heads in fake curiosity and asked, "What makes you think you were chosen by God?" But that wasn't a question. It was a challenge, a test, adare. They didn't just doubt your calling. They dared it to prove itself, as if the anointing could be dissected by their ego or validated by their limited perception. They walked in thinking they were the judge, and you were on trial. But have you ever wondered what happens when someone tries to put God's plan on the witness stand? When they mocked your discernment, they weren't just mocking you. They were mocking the Spirit of truth itself. And the heavens were watching silently, but not passively, because when a chosen one is tested, it's not the chosen who are on trial. It's the challenger who just walked into divine territory without knowing it. So, tell me, who really needed the proof? They asked for a sign, and heaven gave it to them, not with thunder, not with flames, but with your stillness, with your piercing clarity, with your unwavering peace that disarmed them without a single raised voice. They wanted fireworks, but what they got was a mirror, a kiet, sacred mirror that reflected back every false motive they carried, and that shook them, just like the Pharisees who demanded signs from Jesus, forgetting that the greatest sign was standing right in front of them. Matthew 12:39. Your presence alone was their proof. How could they not see it? The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. John 1-5. You didn't have to perform. You didn't have to explain. You simply had to be who you are, and that alone dismantled their arrogance. Think about how many people have tested others out of their own insecurity. Galileo was mocked by the very minds that feared what his truth would reveal. Joan of Arc was burned for claiming divine guidance, only to be honored centuries later. Malala Yousafzai was ridiculed by extremists for demanding education, and yet the world now honors her courage. Isn't it strange how history treats the chosen ones? First with suspicion, then with regret. They thought they were testing you, but they were testing the one who sent you. And heaven doesn't respond kindly to that kind of pride. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6-7. The moment they questioned your authenticity, they walked straight into a divine setup, one designed not to destroy them, but to strip them of the illusions they clung to. And now, everything is unraveling. Their plans, failing, their confidence, shaken. The same mouths that demanded proof are now whispering prayers, hoping to reverse the ripple effect they started. Have you noticed how quiet they've gotten lately? How suddenly distant they've become? They didn't expect that the sign they asked for would be so personal, so surgical. They weren't ready for your calm response to leave such a loud echo in their soul. Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm. Psalm 105-15. That's not a poetic phrase. It's spiritual law. Every time they recall what you said, that one sentence you dropped so effortlessly, it follows them like a shadow. It replays in their mind, because it wasn't just insight. It was truth backed by spiritual authority. A truth their pride couldn't handle. They're not afraid of you anymore. They're afraid of whatever force walks with you. Have you ever felt someone watching you from afar? Not out of curiosity, but out of fear. That's them. They feel watched now, but not by your eyes. By consequence, by truth, by divine justice. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:14. And they know, somewhere deep down, that they brought this judgment on themselves. Do you think they regret mocking what they didn't understand? Absolutely. They're haunted not by your power, but by the realization that you never needed to prove anything. Because chosen ones don't prove, they reflect. They mirror back what others try to hide from, and in your presence, they saw themselves. Not the version they post online, not the one they perform as, the raw version, broken, arrogant, and misaligned, just like Cassandra, the mythical prophetess, cursed to be disbelieved. Your warnings weren't taken seriously until they began to manifest. Now the same voices that laughed at you are pleading silently to be spared from the weight of what you carry. They used to want your energy, now they just want distance. Isn't that ironic? Let's talk about Whitney Houston. She was told again and again to tone down her voice, to humble her power. But she wasn't meant to dim. She was chosen to echo something eternal. And when people tried to reduce her brilliance to a stage trick, it only made her legacy burn brighter. That's the same with you. Your existence speaks volumes even in silence. The truth is, they're terrified, not of what you did, but of what you knew, of how you smiled and spoke truth with precision, of how you didn't fight, yet still left them dismantled. That's the power of spiritual discernment. For the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. Hebrews 4:12. They wanted smoke, but now they want quiet. They're trying to backtrack without admitting defeat. But here's the thing, you were never the one on trial. They were. The minute they stepped into your life with doubt in their hearts, they unknowingly walked into a divine courtroom, and they were the ones being weighed. Just like Pharaoh hardened his heart against Moses, only to beg for mercy when the consequences became undeniable. Exodus 9:27. These people are now pleading to be left unseen by the very truth they once rejected. You weren't sent to expose them. You were sent to be who you are. And that alone exposed every lie they were standing on. You didn't ask for this gift. You didn't chase the platform. You didn't force the connection. But when heaven marks you, even those who pretend not to believe in anything feel it. Your presence was a divine interruption. Their souls knew it. That's why they're pacing now. That's why they're overthinking, retracing, reliving every moment they stood in front of you and laughed at the voice of God. They thought you were a person. They didn't realize you were a portal, a walking revelation wrapped in humility. So now, the very Proof, they demanded, has become their silent conviction. They got the sign they asked for, and it broke them in the most unexpected way. Because what they saw in you, they can never unsee again. Number 14. They wanted proof you were chosen. Now they're begging the universe to unchoose them. To every chosen one who has made it this far, thank you, truly, your spirit, your discernment. Your presence here is not by coincidence. This message found you because it was you, while others were demanding you prove your worth. You simply lived in your divine truth, and now that truth has done what truth always does. It pierced through noise. It revealed what was hidden, and it healed without needing permission. You didn't have to raise your voice or retaliate. You didn't have to convince anyone. You just showed up in obedience to your calling, and heaven took care of the rest. Have you ever wondered why they couldn't relax around you? Even when you said nothing, why they tried to mock your silence, yet found themselves haunted by it later? It's because your very presence calls their spirit into accountability. It's not that you're intimidating, it's that your clarity reminds them of everything they've been avoiding. The truth is, they're not just uncomfortable around you, they're uncomfortable around their own reflection when you're in the room. You were never there to fit into their comfort zone. You were sent to confront the blindness they normalized. And chosen one. If no one's told you this yet, the way you spiritually intercepted, exposed, and reversed every attack without even breaking a sweat, that wasn't luck. That was divine strategy. That was evidence of your anointing. They thought you were just another kind soul. But what they didn't know was that your kindness is wrapped in fire. Your intuition, unteachable. Your silence, loud in the spirit. Your energy, a walking assignment. You don't move randomly, you move with instruction from heaven. That's why you don't react like the rest. You observe, you wait, then you act with precision. That's what being chosen really looks like. Let them be rattled. Let them feel the weight of your presence. Don't shrink your discernment just to keep the peace. You are the peace that reveals the hidden chaos. Your job isn't to entertain their denial. Your job is to be the divine interruption to spiritual sleepwalking. And whether they admit it or not, they felt it. You were the sign they asked for, and now they can't unsee it. I want to take this moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart for walking through this message with me. Your spirit is powerful, and your presence here makes all the difference. If this message has blessed you, stirred something in your soul, or confirmed what God has already been whispering in your spirit, and you feel led to support this work through a super thanks, I humbly receive it with deep gratitude. Your generosity fuels the creation of these divine reminders. But please know this, whether you donate or not, I am thankful for you all the same. Just the fact that you're here, growing, receiving, and walking in your calling means the world to me. As we close, I speak blessings over your life. May your discernment grow sharper with each passing day. May your peace remain untouched by chaos. May every room you enter sense your anointing before you speak, and may every lie spoken against you collapse under the weight of your silent truth. You don't need to prove anything. The fruit of your life is louder than their opinions. You are the evidence. You are the sign. You are the storm they didn't see coming, and they'll never forget the moment they tried to test you, and God answered instead. Stay covered. Stay powerful. Stay chosen. Until next time, keep shining. To every chosen one watching, thank you for staying until the end. Your presence, your spirit, your growth here matters more than you know. You didn't need to prove your anointing. Your results did the talking. You didn't fight to be seen. Your silence shook the room. They weren't just uncomfortable with you. They were uncomfortable with the truth you carried. So never shrink to make others feel safe. You weren't sent to blend in, you were sent to awaken. Your clarity wasn't noise. It was a spiritual alarm, and whether they admit it or not, they heard it. You were the sign they asked for, and they'll never forget it. If this message blessed you, and you'd like to support this work, you can do so through Super Thanks, and whether you give or not. Please know, I'm deeply grateful just to have your presence here. Your support in any form means the world. May you be covered. May you be favored. And may you walk boldly in your assignment. You are chosen. You are evidence. You are unforgettable. Stay powerful, and I'll see you in the next word.